The silence period had already started. He knew the second the doors of the elevator closed. He'd mistimed getting on, thinking he could use it before it started. The elevator dipped and kept going down. Somebody was in here with him. They were pressed into the far corner, hand against the railing, breathing too fast. He saw the panic on their face. Their eyes kept darting to the panel and back, as though trying to accelerate their destination with their gaze. He noticed the sweat, a dark curve spreading out from their shirt collar. The indicator on the panel froze. The elevator slowed and then suddenly stopped. The other person lunged forward, hands braced on their knees, and expelled a breath that was more of a gasp. They kept it quiet. He took a step towards them without thinking. The word died in his throat, not because he'd wanted to stop, but because thinking about saying it produced a feeling of resistance that he couldn't push through. He reached out and hit the emergency button instead. A green light instantly illuminated around the button. Request acknowledged. He waited stupidly for the voice. There wasn't one. There never was during silence. The other person slid down the wall, legs folded awkwardly underneath them. Their breath caught in the back of their throat. He crouched down beside them, his hand hovering near their shoulder. He wanted to ask. He didn't. He reached for the doors, pushed the button. Nothing. Pressed his hands to the seam between them and pulled. They didn't move. He hit the emergency button again. Request acknowledged. He stood and kicked the wall, a sharp sting of pain shooting up his leg. He kicked it again, then banged against the doors. 3 hard blows, a pause, then 3 more. The noise clattered down the shaft, tinny and weak. He could hear footsteps outside. They slowed. He hit the doors again. The footsteps stopped. For a second, he hoped. Maybe that was enough. Maybe they'd tap back or call out, "Hello, is everything all right?" Just a tiny infraction. But the footsteps continued, walking away. It wasn't that they hadn't heard. They had heard. They just hadn't answered. Answering was intent. Intent was forbidden. The person behind him let out a pained gasp and sagged forward, hands clutching at their chest, and then falling limp to the floor. Their arm hung at an odd angle, fingers curling and uncurling as if seeking a sensation that was no longer there. He knelt again, sitting them up to support their head and neck and keep their shoulders straight. Knowledge from countless posters and public service announcements. The person's eyes lifted and stared deeply at him. Then their hands slowly began to rise, a slow movement as though fighting against pressure. They started to sign. The first shape was unmistakable. He had learned it in school, like everyone else. Early on, when silence started, visual language had been allowed, one of the few concessions. But not anymore. Signing wasn't permitted in silence. Silence didn't prohibit noise or sound. It prohibited communication in any form. They completed half the sign and their hands stopped, hanging in the air, trembling. Their eyes darted to the camera in the corner of the ceiling, then back to him. They dropped their hands. Their breathing faltered. They tried again. The signs were hurried, almost clumsy, but he recognized them. A name, a location. One hand failed halfway through, fingers going slack. The other shook violently, trying to compensate. They reached for him and clamped onto his hands with a desperate grip, pulling his fingers, guiding them into position to complete the sign. A cart rolled by, its wheels clicking over an uneven surface. Activity continued in the building, oblivious to their plight. The other person squeezed his hands tighter, trying to finish. He knew what completing it would mean. He also knew what refusing it might mean. The silence period had hours to go. He didn't pull his hands away. He didn't finish the sign. The elevator remained still. And somewhere above them, they were being watched. Some hours passed, and the elevator still had not moved. The other person's weight pressed harder against him now. Their head, unable to stay up, dropped forward onto their chest. He again pressed the emergency button. Request acknowledged. He watched, hopelessly, expecting a different outcome. But as before, nothing happened. He kicked the door as hard as he could in frustration. The other person let out a loud, sharp gasp. Their eyes were opened wider now, and they lifted their hands to start signing. Their hand motions were smooth, their panic dulled by a desperate resolve. A name, a location. He understood them again instantly. The next signs were still clear, providing more details of a building and a floor. Their fingers started to falter again, the effort being too much, and their fingers locked, unable to complete the sign. They looked at him. He could see the pleading in their eyes. They gripped his hands, their fingers digging into his flesh, attempting to press his into the required shapes. They were too weak to direct it fully, locking halfway, the effort collapsing. They sighed and let out a weak moan as their head fell back against the wall. He glanced at the ceiling panel, at the black camera directly above. Suddenly, so softly it was barely audible, something clicked. The small red light next to the camera's lens glowed to life. He froze. The camera tilted, a micro adjustment to center the frame. It had been offline, or maybe it had been watching the whole time, and now they wanted him to know. Their hands trembled violently as they tried to reach for him again. He thought about speaking. One word: help. It would require less energy than resisting. His mouth opened slightly, and air passed his tongue. His voice died in his throat, caught between thought and fear. Everyone knew that violations were not punished immediately. All evidence was gathered first, then analyzed later. Before he could think about it further, the other person's body started to convulse. Their eyes rolled slightly back before struggling to focus. He helped pull up their shoulders, getting them upright again. They tried to perform the signs. This time, the motions were shaky and clumsy, but he understood the same name and location, as if they were afraid he would forget if they didn't keep signing them. A distant, metallic thud echoed up the elevator shaft, followed by a vibration that thrummed through the floor. The elevator lights flickered, a single, brief flash. He jumped. It looked as if they were starting up, but the vibration subsided, and it didn't move. The other person's fingers twitched against his wrist, pulling at his arm, guiding his hand, pressing the shapes into place and trying to finish the sign. He looked down at the grip on his hand. He could feel their failing muscles at work and hear their breath faltering again. He thought about the time, that there was no way to measure how far into the silence it was. Did they only have minutes left, or still hours? He didn't want to imagine still being here when the other person stopped breathing altogether, when the doors opened and the questions he wouldn't want to answer started coming. He pulled his hand away gently, just enough to stop the sign. The other person looked at him. There wasn't anger or fear in their eyes, but a sense of knowing the impossible position he was in. Their grip relaxed. Slowly, their fingers slipped from his skin. They collapsed into his lap. The elevator felt smaller and the air thicker. He stood up sharply and pushed the emergency button again. Request acknowledged. He banged his fists violently against the doors, at a loss for what else he could do. The other person started coughing, then choking. He looked back instantly. Their head was tilted against the wall, their eyes now only half open. He crouched down, supporting their neck. Their chest rose and fell. It paused and rose. The pause lengthened each time, his own breath feeling impossibly loud in his ears. The red light on the camera glowed steadily. He stared at it and wondered if whoever saw it would understand the distinction between doing and failing. He felt a faint twitch of the person's fingers against his arm. He took their hand without conscious thought. Their grip barely returned the pressure. No more signs, no more strength. The elevator lights flickered once, longer this time. He looked at the panel. The number blinked and changed. The elevator lurched violently, throwing him against the wall. The other person slumped, their weight dragging at his arm. The elevator hum intensified as it started to move. And then the other person stopped breathing. The silence period ended as it had begun, without announcement or notice. The elevator pitched, steadied, and then began to descend. The other person leaned onto him as the motion began. Their weight dropped fully against him, and it felt like a finality he had already known. He shifted automatically under the pressure, lifting their shoulders, angling their head, same as he'd been doing for what seemed like hours. It elicited no response. The elevator slowed to a stop, and the doors opened. People were outside, not gathered or waiting to help, just going about their normal routines. Someone stopped, though, and recognized the situation immediately, pressing the emergency button on the panel and said, "Medical emergency." Then events followed quickly after that. Emergency services arrived in minutes, fast enough to feel deliberate, as if they had been waiting for the silence to end. They moved with an efficient rhythm, gloves snapping, equipment unfurling, a strong hand firmly guiding him away as the other body was transferred onto a gurney. A pulse checked, then rechecked. "He's gone," said a voice that sounded unnervingly flat. The time of death was indeterminate, just that it happened during the silence. One of the officers asked him questions, briefly checking a tablet showing the elevator camera feed, then turned back to him. No questions about what had occurred between the floors. Nothing about the attempts to sign. Nothing about what he had almost done. They were procedural questions. Did you press the emergency button? Yes. Did you attempt to signal physically? Yes. Did you remain in the elevator until the period of silence ended? Yes. The questions were calm, delivered in unremarkable tones. The answers were sufficient. He found himself waiting for a particular question to arrive, whether he had spoken. One of the officers nodded, tapped something on a datapad. "Thank you for staying calm," she said, not looking up. "And for your cooperation," added another, already turning away. Neither asked if he had completed the sign. Neither asked what choice he had made. There was no need to. He remained off to one side, watching the stretcher being wheeled away. His throat felt parched. The space around the open elevator doors began to fill with the routine flow of people resuming their lives, as if the other person were already an irrelevance. Someone murmured an apology as an arm brushed his. For a few seconds, he stayed there, acutely aware of his hands hanging at his sides, slightly curled, waiting to be guided into action. Eventually, a hand motioned him away, and he complied. The remainder of the day was uneventful. The notice of the review of events arrived later. There was no charge or reprimand, simply a notification that a review had been scheduled. No date or detail of the review. He read it again, more slowly. It did not ask what he had done. It did not accuse. It only noted that something had happened during the silence involving him, and it would eventually be looked at. Days passed. As the next period of silence approached, he felt the familiar tension with a newfound clarity. Meetings being rearranged, stairs being chosen over elevators, and building exits being approached with greater frequency. No one talked about it, because no one ever did. He noticed himself standing nearer to doorways, closer to open public spaces, without framing any of it as a choice, but as a consequence. Not exactly out of fear, but out of a greater understanding. On the morning when the next silence period started, he was on a public plaza and stood there watching the city around him, the impassive faces and deliberate movements. The silence doesn't ask you to decide what is right and wrong. It never has. It only wants you to know what you are willing to leave unsaid.